All right, so I will kick things off. So hello everybody. Sorry about that. My name is Matthew Butler. I'm a business development manager at WeGame. So some of you might know Yodo1 from our work in mobile game publishing. So we're based in Beijing, and our roots are really in publishing games to the China market. We've worked with studios like Defiant Development out of Brisbane to publish their game Ski Safari in China, and we've worked with other studios like Hipster Whale for Crossy Road, as well as Featherweight with Rodeo Stampede to not only publish their games in China, but also to publish them globally on Google Play. But today I'd actually like to shift gears here and talk about a recent endeavor for Yodo1, which is actually PC publishing in China, and more specifically premium PC publishing in China. And kind of some of the steps that you guys can take, as I assume most of you are PC developers, some of the steps that you guys can take to culturalize your game and really drive traction to your game in the market. So to start things off, so there are really two main distribution platforms in China at this time. As you all know, Steam is by far the largest at this time. There's about 225 million users in Steam in China, and it's growing rapidly. The second is a relatively new platform, and it currently represents the largest competitor to Steam in the market, and that's Tencent's WeGame. So I'm not sure how familiar you guys are with the company Tencent, but it's really one of the big tech giants of China. So they have a messenger app called WeChat, which has about 900 million monthly active users. So very, very highly integrated into everyone's life. And they've seen an opportunity to kind of capitalize on a lot of the success that they've seen in the PC market over the last few years. So they are growing quickly, and although they're the first domestic market to really try to compete with Steam in China, we foresee a few other ones to start cropping up. None at this point, but if the Android market in China is any indication, it's likely that more large tech companies like Tencent will start to move in to occupy that vacuum that exists in the China Steam market. So as many of you may know, China is one of the world's fastest growing, is the world's fastest growing Steam market. But it's only recently happened over the last few years. So if we look at April of 2015, we can see China only represents about 4% of a market that is around 125 million users. Very solidly in sixth place, a tier 2 market for Steam. However, in October of 2017, the Chinese market has now moved up to around 10%, falling just shy of Russia's 9.9. And as we can see in the 2015 numbers, the United States still represents the largest market by far at 18.5%, and Russia is a rather distant second with 11.9. However, in 2017, there's about 275 million active users or registered users on Steam, and now China is taking up about 10% of that. And at the same time, you can see that the share of the United States has actually shrunk, as has Russia's, whereas China's has grown much quicker. So they've actually been, if this is any indication, it's that they're growing at a much faster rate than the United States and Russia. But what's actually happening underneath the hood here? So as we can see from this graph, in 2015, the active users on Steam in China was only about 5.3%. Since then, it's grown to about 25.5%, so it represents about a 370% growth in users. And at the same time, the China market is absolutely massive. There's about 300 million PC gamers in the market, so that 25 million users is just a drop in the bucket for the total market. So we see a lot of room for growth into that remaining 275 million users. Not only are there more users in China's Steam market, but we can also see that the customers are actually purchasing many more games. So in 2015, the average Steam library had only around 3 games. At this time, Steam was still relatively new in the China scene, and I could bet you, dollars to donuts that at least one of those games was like Dota 2. So what we can see though is in 2012, the average amount of games in a person's Steam library has grown to 12 games. So what this means is that when the first users were starting to come into Steam in China, they were really playing 1, 2, or 3 games and not really exploring the wide breadth of the Steam library. However, in 2017, as if the 12 games are any indication, it's that gamers are expanding their libraries and looking into titles that they normally wouldn't have looked into 2 years ago. So if we take these two numbers and we kind of put them together, we can see the total expansion of the market. So in 2015, there were about 16.1 million games that were purchased at that time in China. Since then, in 2017, the number has skyrocketed to about 306 million games. So represents about an 18,000%. Represents about an 1800% growth in total consumption. So why the sudden change? Why are more players coming into the market, and why are they purchasing more and more games? So the first reason for why players are coming into the market is actually this publishing agreement between Chinese tech company Perfect World and Steam to publish Dota 2 in the market. So in 2014, 2015, Dota was actually quite popular in China. However, none of the users were technically in China. So they were all downloading the games through Hong Kong servers, and they were all playing in Hong Kong servers through VPNs. So the average Chinese consumer, the average Chinese gamer, couldn't play Dota 2 on China-based servers without serious connectivity issues. So after Perfect World published Dota 2 in China, they created their own server base in the region and kind of kept it within continental China, so players could play against one another. And it migrated all of the users who were then registered in Hong Kong into the China store, and then as well as all of the other players who were interested in it and reached by Perfect World's marketing plans to pull them into Steam and start playing Dota 2. The second is Steam started to support localized payment methods for the Chinese user base. So before 2015, Valve was still much more Western focused, right? So they were using payment methods like Visa, MasterCard, PayPal, etc. But the reality of the situation is that in China, nobody uses any of these things. Nobody has any experience with these things. So what they do use are things like Alipay and WeChat Pay, which are accounts that you can create and link to your phone. With WeChat Pay or with Alipay, you can go around scanning QR codes and then pay directly from your account. So that's typically linked with a bank card, and that bank card is generally Union Pay. So without Union Pay, WeChat Pay, or Alipay, there were just barriers to entry for consumers to actually convert and make purchases. So the preconceived notion was really that Chinese players just aren't willing to purchase games. But what they found after 2015 is that they actually were willing to purchase games. They just didn't have the support to make the purchases. The third is recommended pricing. So before 2015, the pricing was just a bit off, right? So it was priced a bit too high for the Chinese consumers. Again, so piracy is extremely rampant in China. Any build that's on Steam, you can pretty much download a build of it for free on a pirated website in China. And what Steam did around 2015 is they actually figured out that sweet spot of where players can appreciate the convenience of Steam and pay a price that doesn't break the bank. So as a rule of thumb, Steam has offered recommended prices of about 50% of Western titles. And finally, China-based servers. So before 2015, there was really only one server in China, and the traffic was pretty flooded, and it took about 2 1 to 2 hours to download even a moderate-sized game. However, after 2015, when they started to really focus in on the China market, they started introducing more and more ways for players to connect to servers and download their games. Now I think there's about 5 or 6 different locations that you can download your games from. So it's sped up the process of pulling games down considerably. But what all of these really show is that Steam is looking, or Valve really, is looking to China as an important market that they're looking to capitalize on. And what they've done is they've taken their product, Steam, and made it into a very Chinese experience, right? So a Chinese player can go onto Steam's China page and have it feel like it's a local client, have it feel like it's something natural that they can navigate very easily. And that's kind of the crux of my talk today, is that Steam has actually given you the platform to do the same with your games, right? So they have given you the ability to make a product that can be culturalized and feel natural for the Chinese audiences. And if Valve's changes to Steam is any indication of the types of players and the amount of players that they can bring into their platform, the same is true for your indie games if you just use the right approach to culturalize them and make it feel like a Chinese experience. So there's a few aspects that you can do to take your game and make it into this Chinese cultural experience and make it something that is natural for Chinese users to play. First and foremost is you have to have a great game, right? If you have a great game, it will sell. And then following up with that, culturalized storefront, extremely important. Ground up in-game content translation, optimized pricing, marketing, live ops and consumer support, government license, and finally distribution. So great games will sell, even if you've done none of the above here, right? A great game, as some of you know, will sell well in China, even if you don't have the basic localization. It's common belief, for some reason, that there's only a certain type of genre that will work in China. So you have your MOBAs, your roguelites, MMORPGs, something that's multiplayer and can stream very well. But I think if you look at some of the games that have been selling really well in China recently, it kind of debunks this myth. So my belief is that the key is to have a great game, and if you have a great game, you have an ability to grow on that game and really appeal to a market. So if you look at, any of these games here, they don't really fit the mold of that MMORPG, roguelite, highly streamable content. For example, take a game like Stardew Valley, right? It's absolutely a craze in China, and yet it's very introspective. It is a single-player game, not very streamable. So it doesn't fit the mold of those MMORPG MOBA type games at all. And yet it still sells extremely well. And then you have different genres, like platformers. Lost Castle, of course, is a roguelite. And then Abzu, again, very introspective and art-based. And they all sell extremely well in China. So kind of what I'm going to frame this conversation around is a game that we published along with Defiant development in China to kind of grow the brand in the region. And that game is Hand of Fate. So like those games that you saw on the previous page, Hand of Fate really doesn't fall into this, hard category of like a game that will perform extremely well in China. It's kind of a card game, roguelite, RPG type game, very unique. I'm not sure if any of you have experience with it or have played it or know it, but it kind of breaks the mold of genres. However, when Defiant Development actually approached us, we worked on Ski Safari, actually. It was our first major title in the China region for mobile publishing. When they approached us to say, like, the game's doing well in China, could you take it and help us to make it do even better? We were a little bit, uncertain at first because PC publishing wasn't something that we really dabbled in before this. But we said, yeah, the game's selling already very well in China, and we feel like we can help it to do even better. So what we saw was that, first and foremost, Hand of Fate is a great game, and it was already selling well in China, and we could add some certain steps to get the game to sell even better. So that's kind of what we decided to do with it. So first and foremost, the most important thing that you can do as a developer when approaching the China market is get a rock solid, culturalized translation of your game. As you can see from these pictures, basic translations from Excel sheets just aren't going to cut it. They can turn out absolutely horrendous, and players will make fun of you on your view page. So what we do at Yoda One is we will assign the game to a product team first and foremost, and then they'll go through the game, play the crap out of it, understand the context of every string that's said in the game, and then localize it from there. So there's a few different ways that you guys can approach this as developers, right? You can work with a partner, of course, who will understand the game, or you can reach out to player bases who obviously have experience with the game and get help from them. Just be careful when working with an outsourcing company to do the translations, as a lot of the times, and this is what we see, is that they will take an Excel sheet and then just translate it directly line for line. And what you get tends to be stuff like this: garden with curled poo. So be very careful about that aspect. And then for Hand of Fate, we actually went a step further, and we did voiceovers for the game. So the game is a bit, again, I'm not sure if any of you have experience with the game, but it has some very cryptic language and waxes poetic at times. So the translation from English to Chinese can be extremely difficult. So what we had to do was kind of rewrite the whole script for Chinese to make it a really culturalized feeling for the game. And then as well as the card art. So that was something that we assigned to our art teams to kind of go through all of the card art and culturalize that as well. So another thing that you're going to want to focus on, is the culturalized storefront. So once you localize a game into Chinese, it'll pop up in the China store as flagged for having a language that is supported for you. So if you speak Chinese and a game comes out that now supports Chinese, it'll be more likely to show up in your discovered section. So once you start driving players to your page, the next thing that you're going to want to do is sell them on your game. So the best way to do that, of course, is the first thing that they see when they come to your page, which is the culturalized storefront. So part of what we did for Hand of Fate was we did logo creation. So we created not only a Chinese name, but also a Chinese logo for it. Again, part of making a Chinese name is about increasing the ease of mouth-to-mouth exchange. So if I was to give you the name of a game in Chinese, it might be extremely difficult for you to go to your friend circles and share that game, right? I mean, you don't speak Chinese, or some of you might, but the same is true in China, right? So it's more difficult for Chinese players to share a game that's not in their local language. So creating a Chinese name is extremely important for increasing word-of-mouth exposure. Second is feature, header, and capsule assets. So for these images, we increased the saturation, made it a little bit more attractive, and then added the logo as well. Description is extremely important as well, and that kind of goes back into really hitting a rock-solid translation for your game. This is something that's going to be that you're going to want to culturalize to make it feel like a Chinese product, to make it feel like it's tailored for the Chinese audience. And then finally, we did Chinese trailers for the game as well, which you can see here.
欢迎来到命运大厅。
So as you can hear there, that's where we added and this can be a difficult thing to do for most games. In some cases, it doesn't work extremely well. You have to really focus on the type of game that it is and really be weary of how well it is.
随时等候你的挑战，你准备好了吗？
In Hand of Fate, it worked quite well, as the dubbing didn't really have this issue because the main character actually wearing a mask to kind of cover over something, which might be bad dubbing. Pricing is extremely important. So once you get your players to the page, you're going to want to make them convert. So the best way to do this is to follow the rule of thumb that Steam actually lays out before you, and that's price your game at about 50% of Western prices. As you can see here, China is, what is it, 7th or 8th as the cheapest prices on Steam. And if you don't price it at around 50%, players just simply won't buy it. Again, piracy is extremely rampant in China. And if it's any higher than that, they will just opt out to the piracy option. So marketing and media outreach obviously is extremely important as well. And once you, what you're going to want to do is kind of, when you have all of your, when you've localized the content, when you've added voiceovers, when you've revamped your store, what you're going to want to do is kind of create a story around that that says, like, we are now attacking the China market in order to, improve the game's success. And this is kind of how we reached out to media sources when we relaunched Hand of Fate in China around May. So what we did is we hyped up the rewritten storyline, the voiceovers, as well as all of the revamped artwork. And we used that to pitch about 30 PC-specific Chinese gaming media websites. And it gained a lot of traction for us. But this is extremely important. So creating a story around the changes that you've made to your game and using those to appeal to the media sources will do wonders when reaching out to media. The second type of marketing activity that tends to work extremely well is using the typical Chinese social media platforms. So the biggest in China for virality purposes are WeChat, which is a Tencent platform, QQ, which is like an AOL instant messenger that never died off, and then Sina Weibo, which is more like a Chinese Twitter. So for these, what we did was we got in contact with a number of, gaming reviews accounts, and then, push that story that we created to apply to the media websites, and kind of said, this is a game that we've taken and we have made it unique for the Chinese audience, and this is why Chinese people should pay attention to it. And it worked extremely well. So in reaching out to the WeChat, QQ, and Weibo accounts, we drove around 26,000 interactions. And then Baidu Tieba is a bit different. It's more like the Chinese Reddit. So for this, we created a page and then would use those gaming accounts to kind of link to that Tieba. And it's a place really where players can interact with one another and share their thoughts and opinions about the game. And this might seem a bit daunting to do for an indie developer who might not have much experience in the China market. So it's something that you can work with. There are local people on the ground. If you have Chinese friends or something like that, or someone that you trust that can help you to reach out, extremely important. Or you can work with a trusted partner to help you to reach out to these blogs. Influencer videos are another key aspect of marketing your game in China. So streaming is actually, China is one of the most popular countries for streaming. There's about 375 million registered streamers, and in China they'll stream anything from just walking down the street with a camera in their face to cooking to playing video games. Games are by far the largest market for the streaming sites in China. And the platforms that they stream on is a bit different than in the West. So the popular ones in China tend to be Youku, which is more like your YouTube equivalent, and then Bilibili and Douyu, which are the Twitch equivalents in China. So reaching out to these influencers is a bit trickier than doing it in the West. Again, streaming makes these influencers a lot of money. So they typically won't do it unless they're seeing some green from it. But for Hand of Fate, we reached out to a number of influencers. We signed two major influencers with around a couple million subs, I think, a piece. And then we got about 100,000 live streams when they went out at peak, and then around 500,000 recorded views. And it did really well in terms of driving players to the game during that launch week. Store features is obviously going to be extremely important for driving visibility to your game. What we found is that Steam is just as interested in expanding into the China market as we are. So what's really important is staying in close contact with your Steam rep, keeping them updated on some of your plans to expand into China, and really, again, it's about creating that story of we're attacking the China market and then pitching it to the right people. So what we did for Hand of Fate was we got into contact with our Steam rep. We said, like, these are our plans. We're going to really expand the game in the region, and Valve has been extremely accommodative to our aspirations to expand Hand of Fate's reach in the market. Then finally for marketing is you can get creative with it. So one of the things that's really popular in Japan actually is this pre-sale event. So WeGame, which I'll go into in just a bit, when we launched on WeGame, we ran this marketing event where we did pre-registrations for Hand of Fate. So we teamed up with Tencent to get a big banner on their WeGame platform that linked to a website that kind of ran players through some of our plans for the market for Hand of Fate on the platform. So that included stretch goals. So if 50,000 players register for the game, the launch price will be reduced to 33%. If you get 80,000 registrations, the game again the price drops with each stretch goal that you hit. And at the same time, we offered like Nintendo Switches, QQ Bucks, things like that. So with any kind of event that's run, it's just important to keep the interest of the player in mind, and whatever will get them, will get them interested and benefit them will be important to driving players to the game. So finally, it will be supporting new players. So after you've driven all the players to your game, you're going to want a way to keep them updated and respond to some of their questions and concerns. This can be another daunting thing for indie developers, but it's something that's really important in creating longevity in your game. So it can be as simple as working with a partner that you trust, or hiring a community manager out of China. You could pull directly from your user base. So after we implemented all of these, the special sauce, we did our marketing, we did our culturalization of the storefront, we did our voiceovers and our rewriting of the script and culturalizing into Chinese. We saw that practice does meet projections. So after the 3 months of launch, Hand of Fate's revenue in China increased by about 1,000%, and Asia now represents about 51% of activations over the last 3 months. And of those, about 48% are coming from China, as that heat map will show. But it doesn't end there. So the Steam market is only one aspect, really, of getting your game the most visibility in China as possible. The second is distributing. So as I mentioned earlier, Tencent's WeGame has kind of stepped onto the scene as the first and only viable competitor to Steam in China. And although it's the first, it is not necessarily the last. So we've heard rumors of other platforms that are kind of cropping up and starting to do like market research on it. Perfect World is one, NetEase, Cube Game is a bit different, and then 360. Again, all tech giants in China that have a lot of pull in the market. But right now, Tencent's WeGame is by far the most competitive and poses the biggest threat to China's Steam dominance, Steam's dominance of the China market. So what exactly does WeGame offer you in your game? So they have about 200 million activations, and they claim about 30 million monthly active users. And the way that they're really attracting these users away from Steam is first and foremost cheaper prices. So as you can see here, the base price on WeGame must be lower than the base price on Steam. It goes a bit deeper as well. They also require that the launch price for your game on WeGame must be lower than the lowest price that your game has ever been on Steam. So I think for Hand of Fate, the lowest discount that it had ever been was about 75%. So for the launch, we had to actually drop that down below 75%. So it's something to kind of keep in mind when thinking about the discounts that you're running on Steam. Secondly is integration with WeChat and QQ. As I mentioned previously, Tencent is the tech giant in China, highly integrated in nearly every person's life that owns a mobile phone. They claim about 900 million monthly active users on WeChat. It's the Messenger app, it's the social media site, and it's the thing that everybody uses. So one of the special features with WeGame is that you can actually, there's a social platform actually built into the store. So what you can do is you can post, I don't know, I guess this guy just posted a picture of himself and his friends. I assume he's talking about a game, but I haven't read it. But you can post these things about games that you like. You can follow other people, and then you can actually share it right to your WeChat moments, which is again like the Facebook. People can click the link and then get. So a lot of virality potential with WeGame. And then streaming is also another service that Douyu, if you recall, it's kind of the Twitch equivalent in China, and they've integrated it right into their platform. So in that top three tab buttons, you have the store, the social feature, and then the streaming. And anyone can stream, and you can follow your favorite streamers on that site as well. And another thing that it offers is you can actually share that directly to WeChat as well. So it offers lower prices and a lot of virality. And then finally, WeGame offers a legal alternative to Steam in China. So as some of you may know, China has some really, really strict regulations when games are published in the region. And every game on WeGame must go through this government review process in order to be published in the region. So all of the games, or 99% of the games that are sold on Steam, legally aren't allowed to be sold in China. So it's all kind of working in this legal gray zone. And WeGame actually offers a substitute, a replacement for that and a safer alternative. One of the rumors or thoughts going around is that the Chinese government could shut down Steam entirely, which would then kind of migrate everyone to this WeGame platform. It's anyone's guess as to whether it might happen or not. No one really knows, but if the Android market is any indication, something similar happened there. But it's kind of up in the air at this point. But so that's kind of where WeGame's going with requiring to get that government license when publishing your game there. And yet it's still lacking something very, very important that Steam has, and that's strong Western titles. So at this time, WeGame only has about 12 Western titles on their platform. They're looking to build that number out significantly over the next few years, but at this point, the games just aren't there. And if you remember back to those first couple of slides where you saw that Chinese gamers aren't just interested in playing one game anymore. They're interested in playing 12 games per library, so they're interested in having that diverse portfolio of games that they can kind of play at their will. And at this time, that's the main thing that WeGame is lacking. Which is also nice because it means that they're looking actively for Western titles. So again, in order to get the game onto WeGame, there's a very important piece, and that's obtaining a government license. And this is actually that banhao, which is like that government license. And getting it is part of the extremely frustrating aspect of this talk. So as some of you mobile developers may know, this is in the iTunes Connect backend that's saying that all games must be licensed in order to be sold in China, right? And that is, although it's not true on Steam, it is true on WeGame. So in order to get the government license, there's a three-step process that you have to follow. I'm just going to skim over it very briefly. word to my sponsor at 2 o'clock. Henry Fong, CEO of Yoda One, will be giving a talk in this room about the whole process in depth. Get your coffee cups ready. It's dry, but it's extremely useful, if not interesting. But I'll give you a quick overview. So copyright registration. This is the government's attempt to kind of curb piracy, although it's still rampant. So this is with NCAC, the National Copyright Association of China, which is basically like a 1-month process of, you just have to provide them with information that shows that you are indeed the developer of the game. Second is it must pass through the review of the Ministry of Culture. This is a kind of a formality or a way of showing that as a developer you accept full responsibility for the content that you're putting into the China market. So the first 2 steps have been around for quite some time, but the third step, that SAPRAFT, the State Administration of Publication, of Press, Publication, Radio, Film, and Television, is the most recent and most rigorous of steps that they've included. So this is where they will actually review your game to make sure that there's no content in the game that could be politically sensitive, goes against China in any way, has any English, or any slew of no-nos that the Chinese government has declared. And that takes about 3 months for that process. So all in all, it's about a 5-month process of a lot of back and forth. And that final process, that SAPRAFT, is also about 150 pages of documents and, you know, filling in lines and providing pieces of code. So, and then after you pass this process, you can finally get your game onto WeGame and other distribution platforms in China. So for SAPRAFT, that third piece of the publishing puzzle, they're looking for things that are politically sensitive, for anything that isn't dubbed as safe gaming. So that could be gore, political motivation, anything that's kind of frowned upon by the Chinese government. And for some of them, it's extremely obvious. So one of the games that we worked on was a game called Forts, with a Brisbane-based developer, Earthwork Games, which actually just was released in China last weekend, which I'm super excited about. And this game, the first time we saw it, we were like, this is never going to pass China review. It's extremely politically fueled. So it's really like it's like the dystopian future where people build forts, and it's a battle for the last oil that exists on Earth. And pretty much the 3 warring factions are the United States, China, and Russia. Extremely political, so it would never pass through review. So what we did for that was we assigned the game to a product team and an art team to scrub all of the politically sensitive content in the game. So as you can see from here, we took the map. It was grounded in reality. We turned it into this more ambiguous Pangea-shaped map. And then there were a number of commanders that were also a little bit risque, and we had to make them, ethnically American or Chinese or Russian. So it was a matter of just making the game not based in reality like they had it in order to get that government license. Some of the review process is a bit more objective, or subjective rather. So what we experienced for Hand of Fate was skeletons are apparently a no-no. So it's a huge part of the game. It's like a fourth of the enemies fall into the skeleton class. So what we had to do for this game was reskin all of the skeletons as these Groot-looking wood golems. And after we did that, it passed the review. I think World of Warcraft actually ran into the same problem when they published their game in China. So all of the skeletons on characters and on card art all had to be changed to be this wood golem type character. So takeaways. So first and foremost, it's extremely important for you as developers to realize, the extreme importance of China and how quickly it's growing, and to use it to your advantage. If you go into it with the right mindset and the right motivation, you can really maximize the amount of users that are coming from that region. And part of the way you can do this is invest in your translations. As those pictures with curly poop or whatever it was, there's any indication, Chinese players are going to see bad translations and they're going to make fun of you for it and they're going to post about it on your page. So it's extremely important to focus in on these and make sure that it's a cultural product that Chinese players can gel with. And that goes for your Steam page as well. Price your game appropriately. Again, use this as a rule of thumb, 50% of Western prices. And Steam, as many of you know, will give you the recommendation page. So follow the recommendations that Steam gives you. Marketing is a bit tougher, but it's extremely important to drive users to your game, especially when you're doing that launch. So keep in close contact with your Steam rep. Tell them about some of the culturalizations that you've made when approaching the China market, and really use that to pitch the game to your Steam rep to get those feature spots. And then finally, government approval and distribution. WeGame is highly integrated into everyone's life through WeChat, and it's a rapidly expanding market. So the future of the Chinese PC market could be looking to WeChat to kind of carry the torch. And that is all I have for you today. Happy to answer any questions that you may have. Yes?
Yes, concerning the Tencent platform, you said you have to launch lower than your price on Steam. So what is the, so two questions, what is the runway, like can you raise the price afterwards if it gets popular? And the second question, like follow-up, is do they take a lower cut than Steam?
Okay, so first question. So you have to, you can increase the price. They would frown upon it and they likely wouldn't provide feature support, right? So they want the game to be always lower than Steam's price. Just in order to attract users. So the majority of Chinese users are still on Steam. And what WeGame is really looking to do is set a price point that's below Steam's in order to make it more attractive. So it doesn't have to be that much lower than the Steam price. You know, just a few percentages, 5% lower than Steam, as long as it's lower. You can raise it. It might create a bad backlash for players who are saying like this game was cheaper and they raise the price. And then if it's higher than the Steam price, then they might not provide the same feature support that they would otherwise. The second question, what was the second question?
Do they take a lower cut?
Same cut, 30%, yeah. Yes?
How do they go like free to play on the WeGame?
So WeGame, so Tencent is known in China as really like the free-to-play masters. So a lot of the games that they have on there are still free-to-play. But what they're really looking to grow out from Tencent's perspective is they want to be known as the premium seller of games, right? So everyone in China already knows them as the free-to-play model. And they're really looking for more premium titles. That's not to say that they're not looking to accept free-to-play titles as well. It's just that that's kind of what they're known for, and they're looking to kind of copy the Steam model of premium titles. Yeah.
What were you saying to like reskin or like redo things to the market and trying to make it feel like a Chinese game as well? I remember with Safari, you added like panda assets and a Chinese level.
Yep.
And one of our strategies for the next game was to actually take that into account and make Chinese assets straight up front. But it sounds like you're saying you should leave that and use the opportunity of advertising that you made the changes for them, and that's a better move.
So in what way would you be changing the assets in the game? So,
It was
or-
Safari, you took the game
Oh,
as
yeah.
well and then added Chinese features.
Yep.
So we were going to add those Chinese features right at the front so we could be ready to go to China.
Yep.
But it sounds like you're saying that...
Would it be a Chinese specific build or would it be a global build? Oh, it would be a global build. So exactly like that's a good strategy to take. I
Okay,
would
so-
recommend, yeah.
Because I must have had the faith that you're saying, yeah, we made it for China and that was a good selling point.
Yeah, so I mean it's the China build, so it is in the same build, but if you go to the Chinese language, it'll switch to like the Chinese voiceovers. So you know those voiceovers obviously are language specific. I'm still a little confused about the question.
Like you were saying, like you contacted all the medias.
Yep.
These ones like, we changed this game around for
Ah,
China.
yeah.
And that was a good selling point. And that was,
Works the same way, so you could do that as well. Yeah, I mean, pitch it. So are you saying like from a marketing perspective,
Yeah.
how do you reach out to these influencers and like pose the story of like, this is what we've done for the game and this is why you guys should care?
yeah, because it's not like we should wait to put the Chinese.
No, not at all. Like if you approach them with a game that's already been like culturalized for China, it's a perfect way to do it, right? You could say like, honestly, it would work even better, right? Because it's a new product, and it already is localized for Chinese. So, yeah.
For a small studio, would you recommend, well, with the cost of good localization, like you were saying, one that's actually not very good, and obviously if we don't speak Chinese, we can't check that ourselves. So considering the costs of good localization, would you say it's worth indies doing that up front? Or you were also saying earlier that good stuff still sells there. Would you say release it without localizing it? If it is selling, then put in the cost?
Put your best foot forward, right? So you're going to get the most traction from your game at launch. So if you have a game that's already localized in Chinese, the feature will go live in China as well. So you put your best foot forward and make the game localized in Chinese before you know, at launch. Anything else? Yeah.
Do you have any other horror stories that went through the government?
The Hand of Fate was really like was really frustrating. It set us back a bit, and then Forts was a whole nother like nightmare. But those are really the two major horror stories. Yeah.
Is there anything in particular, like apart from what you put on the slides?
I mean, there's always little things. So like we also did a game, Human Resource Machine, which we're getting through government review right now, and key to that game is the tiles that you move around and organize in certain ways. And we sent it to review in English because it's kind of crucial to the gameplay. However, we got that back from review saying absolutely no English in the game whatsoever. So that kind of threw us for quite the loop, and we had to go back and we had to fix all of those around in it. Will turn into a bit longer of a process than we were hoping, but so there's always little things that the government's going to come back to you saying like this needs to be changed, this needs to be changed. So it does turn into quite a headache, and it's a lot of back and forth. But it's worth it, you know, to get through that government review and get the game distributed. Yes. Yeah, yeah. So this is the guy I was talking about earlier. Word's the sponsor. So he's got one. He's got.
An entire topic on that later in the afternoon.
Yeah, yeah,
How to get through.
yeah.
Review.
So 2 p.m. in the same room, and he'll take you through all of that. Anything else? What about time? Good. Thanks, guys.